we're being pulled from this spell of materialism that was a bit of a curse that we're now awakening from.
I was kind of inspired by Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures, and I didn't want to show it literally. I just wanted to get into the patterns.
And I think it has something to do with too much of a love of the edge, let's say.
You know, when you're doing something wrong and you kind of know that you shouldn't be, there's that feel. It's like you feel like God is present, going like, "You better not," but she's doing it anyway.
I love the green eye. This is the eye that I see when I meditate and I finally get to a moment of presence.
Like the mushroom makes sense. It makes more sense than an apple.
You realize the patterns that are going on in reality, and that opens up the decision to be good or bad with it.
We see these cycles where you have a great catastrophe, the fall from that, the pain incurred from that, the lessons that pain teaches, the strength that pain offers, and then the recreation of the oasis when you like depart from truth. You manifest hell on earth, and then you have to claw your way out of that hell.
And that's like, you see the arc, this little thing could be like a seed in a sea of chaos, but it's what preserves the world, and all of us have that responsibility.
But I have a lot of hope. I see a lot of signs of revival personally. I think that what we're doing right now to some degree is a sign of revival.
There's a lot of people that are embracing Christianity because they hate wokeism, for example. Does that make you a Christian? Well, your faith is motivated by hatred, so I'm not sure about that.
There was this emergence of the shadow, like in Jungian psychology. Collectively, that seems to be what was happening. So there was like the Pepe memes. In these times of transition, the trickster comes out. And he asked me, what does it mean to be ruled? What does it mean to serve?
Who or what are you a slave to? Have you chosen willfully, or has something taken you captive? Everybody acts out a story, but very few know what their story is. And everyone serves a master, but very few know who their master is. Anyone who has ever felt remorse is aware of a more proper way of being. But what is the proper way of being? This is the fundamental religious question. Everyone must ponder it at some point in their life. Haven't you? And there, in that place of great suffering, dangling over the edge of the abyss by the tips of my fingernails, I saw so clearly. Suddenly I knew that love and truth were firm foundations I could hold on to until the storm had passed, and then after it had passed. And then I felt like I had this responsibility to understand the darkness to help avoid it. Because if you ask, like, what rules me? What do I pursue? What have I put in the highest place? It's like, you might not like the answer, but like, don't not look at it.
Maybe then the third question to tack on to the end of these two is something like, what would you be willing to give up?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of... What do you guys think about JRP versus JRP? Part of me just wants to be like, welcome back to JRP.
It's kind of funny.
I love JRP. I love JRP. I'm into it.
Welcome
I mean,
back to
JRP, it sounds like JBP as well.
It also sounds like JRE.
JRE.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
You're like the JRE, JBP overlap.
Yeah.
But JRP could be its own thing.
I like JRP, you know? I like being like, JRP, welcome back to JRP.
I vote JRP. Yeah, that's...
Okay, let's go JRP.
I like that.
All right. Well, it's decided. I'm back with Lucas and Em today. We talked in the first episode. If you guys want an intro to who they are, you can go watch that. We're going to skip that today. They're legends. Lucas is the young, good-looking, ripped philosopher extraordinaire. Oh, I would hate if somebody described me like that, but but it's all true. Everything I said is true. Lover of wisdom. Emilee is a visionary artist of sorts. I'm going to put up her art right now. She made the distinction in the last podcast that she is an illustrator, which hadn't really occurred to me, but let me do one thing at a time. There we go. I mean, it's implicit, but you said like you made the distinction between like illustration versus just art, and that illustration is all tied to stories. And so today we're going to go through primarily your Genesis series from your website. So just so people know, you might hate this too, but mudhutillustration.com, you can buy all these prints. So Lucas and I both found these. Is this going to load? We both found these and bought them before we talked to you. I think I bought a few before we talked. Lucas, I know you picked up one after you guys
I
talked.
picked
too,
up one
believe.
after we talked, I think. Yeah.
Mhm. So Emilee's great. Maybe I'll plug this at the end too, but I think you should support great. I froze on my end, but
Yeah, I lost you.
okay.
Just for a second.
Well, all right. Anybody have any opening thoughts before we get into the first one?
This is the first one?
Yep.
Okay. No, I'm good. I'm gonna leave Emilee to lead today.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I'll just preface this kind of with saying that I did a series on Genesis. I think I did 4 with Genesis and a couple other biblical stories, and I repeated a few images just because I like the more that I got into it, the more I don't know, I liked the pattern, so I kept going for it. But I was kind of inspired by Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures and going through them, but also going, okay, how do I get into the story experientially and then do something new with it? Because I've seen a lot of the same images trying to show Bible stories where it's like it's just showing the story literally, and I didn't want to show it literally. I just wanted to get into the patterns and kind of like dig deeper into the patterns. So I guess it was kind of a creative experiment for me to try to get further into the stories and have it kind of like inhabit the stories a little bit. I spent a really long time with these stories, like months with each piece and going through the patterns. So after a while, they started not just seeming like Bible stories that were disconnected, but they were kind of like living in my life. They're very present.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first one, creation, and there's the 6 days of creation, and then this middle piece is kind of like before the first day and also the last day. So there's like a return to the state of rest. I actually did this one last because this one is so complicated of an idea that it took me way longer to, I don't know, just to come up with how do you represent that at all. And then it's 6 petal. There's the sacred geometry seed of life or flower of life. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a pretty common motif.
I think it's a flower of life.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
it's like a seed though.
Yeah.
No, it's beautiful. I was gonna ask to start with when you say you spend a lot of time with the stories or with this story particularly, does that mean you listen to it a lot, you read it a lot, or do you think about it a lot? What does that look like in
All of
practice?
the above. Yeah, everything. I listened to the first few Jordan Peterson, the biblical lectures a lot. So that was kind of running through my head, just the way that he starts laying it out. But then I was reading Genesis a lot too, and then I would carry a notebook around with me and just like take notes. Like during the day when I was at work, if like at lunchtime, I'd be like scribbling down weird stuff in my notebook, just going through the patterns. And I think the big thing was the masculine feminine pattern was the biggest thing. So it just kept breaking down into these smaller and smaller components of masculine and feminine, like above, below, light, dark. So that kind of like each petal has an element of that, and even the background maze pattern with the red and the blue is kind of this back and forth with like a feminine, masculine, or because I always use blue for like heavens or spirit, and red is like matter or earth. And I think Adam, the root word of Adam is red or earth, something like that. So it like the more I would learn those little details, the more it would just keep informing me of like the color of the different elements or like how they would interact with each other.
Mm.
Yeah, so I tried to kind of get a little bit of that into each petal. So the masculine thing is like yellow or reddish, and the feminine thing is either kind of like a purplish blue. Yeah, and then I don't know, a couple of them don't have that quite as much. Like there's the second day where it seems more like this opening of space, and the third day, which is kind of, it still has the same kind of thing, but it didn't quite make sense with like red and blue.
Mhm.
get a little green in there. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the colors standing out to me really from this one the first time I saw it, and just that it's like I feel like there's a bunch of different images within the image as well, so you can spend a lot of time studying it, and like taking it piece by piece kind of from the background to the is this like flame surrounding it right here? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
then
I like the idea of like movement, like energy. I mean, like in the vaguest sense,
Ah,
pushing through, pushing things forward through time.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like you can just look at it layer by layer, piece by piece, like from the background to here to here to each image within it, and then to the center, and then like because obviously when you first look at it, your attention, I mean, for me at least, my attention's drawn to the center first, and then you like go out from there. But I feel like you can look at it from border in as well, and it gives you like a different interpretation of it. You notice, yeah, the flames, the energy supporting the creation here, kind of like I feel like to me it represents that like tohu wabohu, like the boundless energy
Right, like
before.
potential kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of under like is a foundation for everything in a way.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds kind of fun. I've been listening to We Wrestle with God, and there's some of these names and words that are just so funny, like the Tova Vabo. Just hear you say it, it just sounds like a Teletubby type of term. But
Yeah.
It's
but yeah,
true. It's
I
true.
was gonna ask you, Emily. You spoke about the masculine and feminine dichotomy. Is
Mhm.
that the most fundamental dichotomy there is? Because the way I see it is that there's a lot of these opposites that are not exactly the same, but they point to the same pattern, let's say. So static and dynamic quality, masculine, feminine, um, even politically conservative, liberal, for example. So
I think so, but you can label it or you could categorize it in different ways, right? You could say masculine and feminine and kind of gender it. Um, you could say something like spirit and matter. You
uh,
could say light and dark. It kind of depends where you want to categorize the thing, but
using it
to
like a
me,
symbol, like it refers beyond itself. Okay.
yeah,
That makes
like like a yin yang. Why does everybody like it? It's like it's so fundamental. There's nothing like what is more fundamental than that.
yeah.
And there's kind of there's the idea that consciousness requires the split of opposites. Like you can't be conscious of something without splitting um the wholeness that you wouldn't be able to be conscious of something that was completely whole and completely full. You kind of have to take one at a time. Um so it just seems like I don't know if that's the kind of the prerequisite for consciousness. It's kind of the most
Mm,
fundamental for us. Like that's what counts
yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like existence in time and space. It's by
Yeah.
necessity is like that. But there's something before, or maybe not the right word. Do you know the image of the snake eating its own tail or biting its
Right.
own tail?
The Ouroboros.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I think is like what is it's not exactly eternity, it's not exactly before time, but it's this union of opposites that we don't exist in, but we all descend from, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to explore that more. I at some point, but I want to read more about that. Eric Neumann did really good work on that.
Yeah.
Young student.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it seems like it's under everything, right? The union of things, but just to be able to like look at it, the qualities of anything, it has to be like a masculine or feminine or like something like that. But it kind of points to the fact that they have to be united, like somehow. Otherwise they wouldn't be split. I guess it's really
Yeah,
hard to talk
they
about.
have to have, yeah, like there's a unity to them.
Yeah,
So
like
there's
one without the
separation.
other. You don't have one without the other. They necessarily go
Ah,
together.
I see. Okay, so they're like codependent because otherwise it wouldn't be an opposite.
Right. Well, there
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be anything dark if there wasn't something light. Like there has to be the separation, otherwise,
Well, even there wouldn't nothing would be if there like you have to have being and non-being. You know, like if there was simply oneness, if everything was whole, if there was no differentiation, then nothing exists. You have to have death to have life, you know, or
Yeah.
else you have to have being to have non-being. You have to have light to have dark. You have to have.
Like a
When you guys
subject.
are talking. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, you have to have. You have to have a subject to an object. If you're just the subject or just the object, there's nothing else. Like what is being experienced, you can't even experience yourself if it's all one. That's why we say like it's like it's self-reflection when you're thinking about yourself. It's not a like you have to look at from outside of yourself backward. There has to be like this point outside of you. So there's
Yeah.
like the idea that like when Adam and Eve were in the garden, they couldn't really see, like it's like they weren't reflecting yet. It's like their eyes were
Oh.
closed.
So
So
then,
they have to be pulled away. The separation is necessary just to be able to look and see what there is almost. It's hard to talk about.
so that separation, does that start once they eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, or does it start when even Eve gets created? Because that's in a way the feminine and the masculine. I don't know. They're not separated, but they're distinguished already. You know what
I
I
don't
mean?
know, maybe that's like a precursor.
Yeah.
Eve being created is like a precursor, like it's a precursor to the separation almost.
Yeah.
Um, there's an idea, Jung talks about this, I think, in the Psychology of the Trinity, maybe, and he talks about the number 2 being associated with the devil, because when there was a unity, everything was fine, but once something wanted to separate from God, then it's like a sin to be separate. So one thing is necessarily pulling away,
Hmm.
but it also creates this divide between subject and object, and it like creates consciousness, which is, you know, I don't know the entire history of the whole thing, but Lucifer means like light bringer, and there's all those
Yeah.
kind of ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's occurring to me right now that the days of creation are all like separation of polarities. I never noticed this until just now, but like, you know, it's the light and the dark, or it's
Ah.
at first it's like above and below almost, it's like the heavens and the earth, the above
Yep.
and the below, and the second day is the light and the dark, and then the land and the sea, the sun and the moon, the air and the water, I guess with the fish, and then masculine and feminine, man and woman. I'd never noticed that, like,
Yeah.
because also in order for anything that's immaterial, I don't know if this is true, but I'm going to say it and tell me if you guys think it's not true. But it seems to me that in order for anything immaterial to exist, it has to exist in relation to a polarity. It's like a table is a table. There it is. It doesn't have to have a polarity, but like love, anything immaterial like love, the polarity of love, indifference, as that's a hotly debated, but truth and untruth, or I don't know, any other immaterial phenomenon, seems to me that
Yeah.
it needs to be. Guys, let me know when I'm back. Am I back?
You're back.
Yeah. You're here. You've been
Did you
here.
guys lose me at all?
We got
No,
everything.
I think you're experiencing
Okay.
it more than we are, it seems like.
Okay, so I'll just keep talking through it when
Yeah.
you guys turn into little glowing circles on my screen. So, yeah, I was just saying, yeah, everything it seems to me that everything immaterial has to exist relative to its polarity, even such things as like being and non-being, life and death.
Yes, I think so, but then I wonder if you pull that all the way to the foundation. So when you go beyond, I think there's a way to go beyond dichotomy.
Okay.
There's Andrea Hyatt. She has a podcast. That's the name of her podcast, Beyond Dichotomy, and I think that exists as well. And I think it's also immaterial, but it's like, well, I mean, God in a way is. Does God have an opposite in Satan? Is Satan even? Is that his opposite? Because I feel like it's always
I
lesser
would think
than. You know
so.
what I mean? Like he's lesser than. So then is it an opposite still? I'm
Sure.
not sure.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, perhaps I don't know how you would categorize it, but it seems right. because also too, like there's a blending of like every potential blending of opposites is like it's not opposites exactly. I don't know. That's an idea I won't be able to articulate properly.
Yeah, we're on the edge. We're playing with the edge of our understanding.
Yeah.
I like those.
Next one. Anything else?
I like that you caught on to that, because that was kind of there's the fractal nature of the unfolding of each day, and that was heavily on my mind. But I couldn't make it more fractal than that, because it would have just been too complicated. But that was definitely became more and more obvious to me the longer I looked at it.
What do you mean when you say fractal exactly?
Well, you start with like light and dark, but then you start with light and dark, but then it expands, and then there's like a subset of that, and another, in the same way that, a fractal is it's the same pattern replicated on different scales or on different layers.
Mm-hmm.
So you have man and woman, but I mean that can correspond to light and dark. It can correspond to like the sun and the moon, or to the sky and the earth. That can all be. It's a fractal of the same unfolding of, I don't know, opposites, just in different forms. So you start with like this kind of empty form of like space and time and up and down, but it gets distilled all the way down to people. Yeah, or to human beings. To there being two. And even the fact that we're split down the middle, and there's like we're mirrored on each side. It's like the same thing in a way.
Yeah. Do you think one level of the fractal is more real than the other, or are they equal in their reality? Like some people will say, for example, it's a modern idea that like in the end of the day, we all consist of atoms, like that's the most important. And of course, it's a bit of a straw man way of describing what they're saying, because it's kind of a ridiculous idea. But is it somehow more real on a higher level when you speak about sky and earth, or feminine and masculine, as opposed to perhaps a lower level of understanding?
I don't know if I know what that means.
So,
I don't think about atoms, and I can't experience them, and neither can you. So, like, I'm not sure. It's gonna sound dumb in a way, but I'm not sure why they matter. I can't get to it. It's inaccessible to me. So, I'm kind of a like I have to stick with what I can experience kind of thing. So I don't know, that kind of stretches my my intellectual thing, maybe.
Sometimes I think we were never supposed to like realize atoms exist. Like that's just, it's like we got these technological instruments to figure out that there's these particles on a level that the human eye could not ever experience.
But they're also kind of like they're like tiny solar systems. It's funny that like the biggest thing and the smallest thing is still the same kind of pattern. But I mean, at least we use the same image to portray them, because you can't see the atom, and you also can't see the solar system, but we use the same image of like circulating circles. I don't know, orbs, whatever. Yeah. So it's still kind of like the biggest and the smallest, paradoxically the same.
Yeah.
At least in our imagination, which might be more real than the reality of it. So.
That's a good comment to slide in there. No, I think they all point to something, like, and then I don't think the micro is more important than the macro in the sense of the practicality of it, but there is a higher reality that's being pointed to that to me is somehow, actually I don't want to say that, I think it is more fundamental, but then it slides into Gnosticism quite quickly once you posit that. So let me not take it too far, like Jung perhaps did.
I just had the instinct to go down that rabbit hole, but I actually think that that's something that we should cover in depth with a little bit of preparation, because that's an interesting idea. But I would need to think about it for like 3 days to like properly have discussion about it. 3 days, maybe 3 years. Anyway. Okay, this is one of 2 Adam and Eve images. Would you like to just start? Tell us why you made it the way you made it.
Why did I? This is a more recent one. So the idea had kind of been incubating longer, I suppose. But again, it's still the opposites at play. So kind of put Adam above because he's corresponding to spirit or the heavens, and her below. There's water. So there's also water above, right? Because in the story, there's like the splitting. There's the waters above and the water below. That's the biblical cosmology. But he's sleeping, or his eyes are closed in this image, and she's holding this fruit, which is the same color as the snake coming down, and she's already awake. And I guess I'm just kind of stuck on that idea that she ate it before he did, and she still gave it to him.
Why do you get stuck on that idea? Because we talked about that a bit before, and we'll talk about it more in the next image too. But
I just think that's wild. I don't know. It really when I was going through it initially. Oh,
she like knew the outcome already.
Yeah, she was already aware that you eat the fruit and something happens. I mean, something changed in like reality, right? When she eats the fruit of good and evil, and then she goes up to somebody else and is like, "Here, I can't be alone with this." That's kind of how I felt almost. It was like she learned something, and then she was like, it can't be just me." That's kind of my person. I mean, that's kind of a personal interpretation. It doesn't say anything about that, but I just was imagining like what that moment must have been like, because he didn't know yet, and I don't know, that's just weird. But yeah, again, there's just the same elements, the above, below, masculine, feminine. There's they're really stylized, and they didn't quite turn out how I would have liked, but there's 4 rivers sort of spilling out from the tree. You can kind of see the 2 in the back implied and 2 in the front. Those are the 4 rivers coming out of Eden. 4 is a really important number if you're into like Jungian psychology. It's the number of like wholeness. So and also that's just part of the story. Like if you look at other depictions of Eden, there's the 4 rivers. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about this one.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about how you got stuck on the idea that she would still give him the fruit, and I think it has something to do with her sin, which is too much of a love of the edge, let's say. So the snake perhaps represents the margins. So I think perhaps she didn't give it to him with the idea that it was bad to give it to him. Perhaps she was like so enamored with that idea of even the outskirts, and perhaps that she wasn't aware that it was a bad thing. She's already in sin, let's say. I don't know.
There's also I think Peterson talks about this at some point in the biblical lectures, but there's this thing about masculine, feminine, and he talks about how, I don't know how he says it, basically that women make men conscious. Like they bring you a problem.
Self-conscious.
Yeah, they bring you a problem, and men solve problems. So like women are like, we're cold, there's animals, eating our children, and the men are like, okay, like we're gonna come up with a solution for that.
Oh yeah, where is little Jimmy?
Yeah. Yeah, but the women are like, they're busy, right? They have things to do. They can't be solving like just in this archetypal way, at least, like, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, whatever. Doesn't matter. But men like are solving problems, and women are bringing up the problems. So like even in a household, that's kind of how it happens. It's like, this is broken, and he's like, okay, I guess I got to fix it this weekend. Like that's just like this recurring pattern. And so her getting the fruit, which is also like I believe Pajot, like one of the Pajots is talking about this recently, but I can't remember exactly how they phrase it, but she's like in touch with the animals and the earth and the things coming out of the earth, like from below, and emotions and things that are more unconscious, like women and the feminine is more in touch with that innately. So they're like bringing up problems to men, and but they get them first. Like the women get it first, or the feminine gets it first.
It's like sensitivity, like in
Yeah.
awareness, yeah.
Right, and then you bring it to consciousness, and then he can, like, discriminate things. The
Bring it
masculine
to
can discriminate
consciousness, huh?
things. Yeah. Well, like, doesn't it happen all the time? I mean, like, I'll just talk about myself, it's fine. I'll get emotional, I don't know what I'm upset about, and I have to go to my husband and be like, "I'm upset about this, I don't know why," and then he's like, "Okay, like, is it this? Is it this?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm overwhelmed with something that's, like, unnameable, and
You
it's
have to like take
unconscious.
the ocean and like chop it to bits, kind of. It's like, okay, this
Yeah,
is, you can't think about all of this, so we're gonna like look at this little
Mhm.
quadrant for 1 second, and be like, all right, what's going on here? What's going on here?
right. Yeah, and so it's I guess that pattern too is kinda on my mind when making this, maybe both of the images that I made with this, but I think that's, probably just because too, like, she's already got the fruit, and I'm, like, coming from a feminine perspective, I'm like, "Whoa, that's where, like, the feminine side comes into this equation," right? Like, you get something, you don't know what to do with it, and you're like, "Here." But that doesn't have to be my, like, literal husband, that could be, like, something that comes up in me that's I don't know what it is, and I have to look at it and go like, "Okay, is it this? Is it this? Is it this?" So it can be, like an interpersonal thing, it could be an interpersonal thing, it plays out on all those levels.
You associated the masculine with the spirit, and I typically have associated the feminine with the spirit, like awareness and those sorts of things as being on the feminine side of that distribution. Like oftentimes I feel like it seems to me like from a Trinity perspective that like God, the Logos, that sort of thing is more of the masculine, and then like the Holy Spirit, like the moving, the awareness, the I don't know, that sort of thing is associated with feminine to me. But why? What's the masculine association with spirit to you?
Well, you're right, there is the Holy Spirit is associated with, like, Sophia.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys could hear that or not. The
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit is associated with, like, Sophia, like, the dove has this kind of feminine quality that's I don't think it's, like, a dogmatic part of Christianity, but it's just an idea that people have maybe, but spirit not in the sense of the Holy Spirit, so not excluding like God the Father or the Logos, but spirit like in this duality of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
heaven being spirit and earth being matter, like matter
Mhm.
even being the root word for mother, so spirit there
Right.
necessarily kind of being father. So um yeah, there's a lot of I don't even know how to describe that. It seems so fundamental that I'm not actually sure where I'm getting that, but it just feels like it's everywhere.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So spirit, I mean, is typically associated with the masculine side of things, or like intellect, all those kind of things. I think sometimes there's a feminine connotation, but it's like generally, broadly speaking, it's usually the masculine.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Is this tree supposed to look shroomy?
a little bit. Yeah, somebody
Because
told
it
me that
is.
afterward, and I was like, yeah, kind of does. It's a throwback to the other one.
Mhm.
To the other image with Adam and Eve, but
Should
I
we
I
should
also
we
just kinda like I like the way it's kinda, I don't know, flowing a little bit, having that again, like the fractal or I don't know, the spiral pattern is just big for me.
It
Mhm.
looks like a
Mhm.
brain as well.
Yeah.
Is that purposeful?
Not super, but, afterward I look at it, I'm like, "Huh, it doesn't really look like a tree, maybe like a Dr. Seuss tree or something like that," but, um, yeah, it's not
Awesome.
super it's not literal, I guess, or you know what I mean? It's not like taking a photograph.
I don't know if you'll have more to say about it, but you posted shortly after Mathieu Peugeot had a talk about sleep and dreams. You posted
Yeah.
something about this image. Is there anything more you can say about that?
I have to say that I never finished that long talk of Mathieu Peugeot's, but he was talking about Eve being associated with sleep and dreaming, and that being, I believe, the sort of what did he call it? The something of renewal.
Yeah, renewal. The Language of
Yeah,
Renewal is
The Language of
gonna be the
Renewal.
name of
Yeah.
his book.
So he's always just on the edge of everything. He's so he's always on the margin of like nobody else is talking about that.
Yeah, but they
At
will
least
be.
Christians are not talking about that, and I love that. And I've always drawn Adam being asleep, so I was just like, it just hit like a nerve. I was like, oh, I have like 3 or 4 images of Adam and Eve kind of stuff, and he's always sleeping. I don't know why I do that. I'm just, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does.
Next image.
Sure.
Next
Yeah.
image.
Adam and Eve continued.
The snake looks beautiful, by the way. Nice face on it.
Thank you.
He looks
There's a
like
tradition in medieval manuscripts or iconography where like he's a snake, but he has like a person face. They're always so weird, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is the first Adam and Eve that I drew, and it was quite a while ago now. Maybe 2017. So I was just out of school, and I was trying to figure out this new like colored pencil weird thing I was doing. And I know you guys said this one was unsettling for you when you saw it, or it's like it's a weird image. Yeah. It's it unsettles me. I don't show it normally. I don't really like it. Like I look at it, I'm like, it makes sense, but I don't like it. But again, it's kind of this moment where I think it's supposed to be unsettling. And I've got, she's got the snake because, she's just been talking to him. It's a mushroom just because, I don't know, it made sense at the time that this sort of like, in this non-literal way, that psychedelics are the same thing, is like, it's this knowledge that you're not really supposed to have. It's forbidden, it's taboo. It's also coming from below. So, like in the way that mushrooms sprout up from the earth, there's also that kind of idea. So there's like the snake, the tree, the fruit, the mushroom. It all kind of goes together. And I put them in water because they're still kind of unconscious. So that's why they're in the water. And and the eye back there is, when you're doing something wrong and you kind of know that you shouldn't be, there's that feel. It's like, you feel like God is present going like, you better not, but she's doing it anyway. So that's why there's like this creepy eye in the back, because the eye also, there's this idea that people don't talk about anymore, where it's like the eye of providence, like the eye of God, instead of like the creepy Illuminati eye or whatever. I don't like that idea. But there's this idea of like the eye of God. So that is kind of what that's about back there.
And it is inside of a triangle.
Yeah.
It's the only triangle in the entire. It's cool how you bring that together. No, I will say I wasn't unsettled by it at all. I actually really like it, which perhaps means that there's something psychologically wrong with me, I assume. But yeah, it's
maybe you can just handle it,
Yeah. No, I just really like it. I love the style. I love the green eye. I mentioned to you, I don't know if it was offline, but this is the eye that I see when I meditate and I finally get to a moment of presence, the end of a yoga class perhaps. And yeah, it's mastery to put them in water. I think that's so cool. I just explained. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, it reminds me of, it's like a dystopian sci-fi movie taking place on a different planet, and something is about to go really wrong.
It does have that feeling,
Yeah.
So I found it. You mentioned it being unsettling. I think I was the one that was like, okay, is this? We were trying to figure out what we wanted to do in this episode, and I found it unsettling. I said when we started, like I hate it, but I think it's like a great piece of art. You know what I mean? And only because like it, I don't know, something about this eye, and it speaks to the excellence of the art in a way, because this eye, you're drawn to it so intensely visually, and it's such like a deep stare from a single eye that you're able to communicate. And then when you guys were talking about the mushroom part of this. The fact that like there's I'm gonna go two different directions. There's something called the stoned ape theory. Have you guys ever heard of this before? I think it was Terence McKenna that came up with it, right?
Yeah.
You know, that the idea that like if you were to look through an entirely evolutionary biological lens, sort of, that part of what there was something about, I think it was 100,000 or 200,000 years ago, that dramatically increased the speed. Let me know when I would say if, but when you guys lose me and I can go back.
You're still here. Yep.
Cool.
You're good.
It dramatically increased the speed of development of the brain. And so it looks like, you know, there's a couple things. Part of that was the discovery of fire, and that was allowed Homo sapiens to allocate more energy away from their stomachs and to their brains, more blood flow when you're eating stuff that is raw or uncooked. It takes a lot more of your metabolic energy, your blood flow being sent to your stomach. And so there's theories that it's in part related to the human discovery and utilization of fire, but also there were these mushrooms growing up on the North African plains that, you know, would come out of cow dung and things like that. And there's a lot of, if you look throughout mythology of many different cultures, there's a similar story at the base of this. I'm going to keep talking when I lose you guys. Sorry that I keep on noticing that, but
There's the mushroom thing. Yeah, actually, that makes sense. And that's kind of what I was thinking when I made this. This was a little while ago that I made this image. I wasn't like super into the idea, but you know, I know it's out there. It's like this story that's out there at least. It's definitely present. So, yeah, it's like the mushroom makes sense. It makes more sense than an apple in terms of just like the symbol of it, you know, especially now that people are actually talking about psychedelics a lot. Like maybe 50 years, maybe not 50. Okay, maybe more than that. 100 years ago, that might not have been, you know, wouldn't have made sense.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I guess it's something I kind of veered away from. That's why I never show this, because I'm like, is the mushroom too weird? Is the eye too weird? Like, this picture makes me uncomfortable. I made it. I don't like, it makes me uncomfortable. So I just don't know what to do with it. But I wanted to show it just because I was like, you know, this was part of the series that I did, and at the time that made sense. And yeah, so I didn't want to leave it out because it just seems like it is an unsettling part of the story. So maybe I shouldn't drop it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's essential, no? Like, I feel it's like cutting out the dark scene from a movie. It's like we need that. Otherwise, what's there to do? But I love the idea of the mushroom because, and even connected to your stone ape theory you spoke about, in the sense that it radically increases knowledge, or like you realize the patterns that are going on in reality, and that opens up the decision to be good or bad with it. Before that, maybe perhaps we're just more natural by default. Like animals are natural. You can't put a lot of morality on a tiger eating I don't know what tigers eat, but a lion eating a gazelle. And once you recognize the patterns, it's the same with like dark magic. You can also manipulate them in a sense, and that's where morality steps in. So
what do you mean it's the same thing as with dark magic?
Well, let's say the cautionary tale with magic or dark magic is like it's gonna fire back at you. And I think I spoke about magic recently with one of my guests. He had a couple of witches on this podcast. Which, if you want to know what a modern witch is, I'll just have to link his stuff down below. But we were talking about magic and trying to figure out what it exactly is, and if there's good magic or bad magic. And I think bad magic is when you realize the patterns of reality and you realize your influence on them, and then you try to subject your own will to them. Like you try to use your own will to force an outcome, and that's where the karma comes in. So yeah, that's how that works. But I'm afraid Jake didn't get any of this. We'll see.
Yeah, he might have paused, but
frozen in time, or he's just holding the same facial gesture.
I'm sure it was such a good answer that you just gave me.
Oh,
it was a great point.
I heard some bits. My buddy who I'm staying with on his farm, he was like, "Yo, I just canceled like one of the 2 Wi-Fis that you had out there like 3 days ago or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then the second one that I wasn't using is trash. So
Oh,
we'll figure it
maybe
out.
you could get it. Yeah, that's the
That's
tragedy.
okay. It happens. We're
It's okay.
talking across like half the entire world, so like the
Yeah,
fact
we
that we
should be
can do that.
grateful. What are we
Yeah,
complaining about?
I'm grateful for the freezing. Yeah.
It's like, is it a wise thing to be grateful for evil? It's like, yeah, well, in a sense, yes. So let's be grateful for all the
For
latency issues.
The
this is what
glitches
makes us
too.
grateful for all of the great technology that does work for us, this
Yeah.
infuriating.
We do work for them, Jake. You gotta
Imagine if
realize.
we were all out dancing and then just there was a DJ that was just like hitting pause every like 23 seconds. It's like, okay.
Basically what's happening, yeah.
Right. Well, I got y'all now. It seems to come in waves, so let's take this good wave while we have it. And speaking of waves, you know what? I'm actually going to stop this. We want to see this one as a diamond because it makes more sense. Boom.
Boom.
This is called The Flood, correct?
Yes.
What does it mean?
So this is the flood story in Genesis. There's a little Noah's Ark in there. It's really small. And it's mostly like I really like in the story how it talks about the waters opening from above and below, because modern people don't think like that. And I like the idea that they're opening, like it calls it like a floodgate maybe or something like that. And it's just like this really cool, this really powerful image of something just being opened, and chaos flooding everything. So in the story of the flood, Noah lands eventually on a mountain. I can't remember what it is now. It's been a while. But he does, like, he lands on a mountaintop. So there's a little mountain there at the bottom, and then I've got the sun and the moon, like, stylized in the corners, which is kind of breaking things down to the most essential, like masculine, feminine again. And yeah, the middle is a void, because when things are being dissolved or broken apart, that's what takes precedent, I guess. It's empty, which is deeply unsettling, I think, to experience. So yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking about with that.
How do you guys think this applies to culture today? Society.
This entire
today?
image?
Yes, I mean the image, the story, I guess I can lead to give you an example of what I mean. I feel like you see cycles in that repeat throughout history. And it seems to me that there's this oscillation between, it's a good example is the hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. So the cycle continues. And it seems to me that we spoke about this a bit, Lucas, on the episode on your podcast, but the four turnings, every 80 to 100 years throughout history, you typically see these cycles where you have a great catastrophe, the fall from that, the pain incurred from that, the lessons that pain teaches, the strength that pain offers, and then the recreation of the oasis before the wise king becomes senile and willfully blind and your society collapses. And man, let me tell you, I wouldn't imagine, I don't really want to go down a political route, but I'm about to, that in the United States, you see, if you want to look at the position of the wise king becoming senile and willfully blind, and then looking at the past 4 years of having Joe Biden in office, I'm really speaking more from an archetypal lens. it like makes so much sense. It's like, where this is a simulation, right? Like, what's going on, you know? Like, it's just too predictable. It's just too on the nose, you know? It's like the writers need to, like, you know, like make this simulation a bit more
Realistic.
yeah, right, you know? And so I feel like we're seeing, you know, I feel like I've seen this a bit in my, you know, so then the United States, my home country, but then also my home state, California, where you've seen this, you've seen a city like LA that I lived in for the past 10 years, and I'm from Southern California. And I love California, by the way. I went, you know, I was living in Florida at the beginning of the year, and I'm out there like talking all this shit, basically, like, oh, like California's way better than Florida. You guys are lame. You know, y'all don't know, you know, like, you know, I rep my home state. I love my home state, you know, and
Yeah.
it breaks my heart to see the ways that it's becoming more corrupted and more, you know, that it's like falling apart more and more. And I don't know exactly what I'm getting at with this. It's more just a feeling. It feels to me like that flood story is correlated. There's a similar, you know, there's a similar story to some degree about Sodom and Gomorrah, right? But it seems to me that when you like depart from like truth, essentially, you manifest hell on earth, you know, and then you have to claw your way out of that hell and reset up the oasis in that cycle. And that's part of why this circular feeling to this, like that, I feel like that I wouldn't have associated that perhaps with this story, that cyclical nature of it, as much, unless I'd seen it in this flowing down a vortex sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does kind of, I mean, it's kind of like flowing down the drain. There's a circling the drain kind of thing going on here. Yeah, I see all of those themes. There's a reason that certain people online have been talking about building your arc, right, to preserve something while the chaos sort of heightens, which seems like it's only going, I mean, it seems like it would only increase. I don't know. The Joe Biden thing, whether he was a Republican or a Democrat, it doesn't really matter. He was like asleep, which was weird.
Weekend at
But
Bernie's.
then, yeah. So I think this thing about the chaos breaking through is what, I forgot, how did you phrase your original question? Was it, how does this reflect it on society right now at large? But
yeah, is there any like reflections or
yeah, I think that as we we've lost the thing that binds everything together, which should be like God should be in the middle, right? Like the highest thing should be in the middle. And when that goes, for whatever reason, you can blame it on this or that or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But when it's
and there's
not
not a single thing
functioning
to blame it
anymore,
on.
say that again.
There's not a single thing to blame it on, you know, like that's like a big error I feel like I see, is everyone's like, oh, it's this, it's that, it's this group, it's that group. It's like, no, it's all of you and the war raging inside of all of you, you know.
Yeah, it's it's more fundamental than that. So everybody's trying to pinpoint like what it is, and it doesn't seem to, like 100 years ago the same problems were relevant to people. We just think that they weren't, or like 100 years before that. They were talking about the same things. If you look, we think we're different now, we're not. It's the same problem. So we are like circling the drain. It's just kind of like more obvious or exaggerated, maybe, because of how much information is floating around. So that might hasten the chaos incoming.
Yeah.
But that chaos like breaks down the structure, I guess. So that's kind of this maze like thing around the edges is more like something solid, something structural, and the swirling sort of, you know, water or whatever is the dissolution of those things. And then you start seeing people like there's you know, there's an uptick in people who are mentally unwell, in drugs and homeless, you know, whatever. There's a lot of things you can point to where you go, this doesn't look good. And I think that's the chaos like flowing into the cracks. Like the cracks start opening, and that's the floodgate. So I don't know. This is probably the most relevant image, I think, for the moment.
I think it reflects the fact that the world is always ending, and today especially we speak about that a lot. Apocalypse. People think the world is ending for ecological reasons, political reasons, spiritual reasons. It's all coming together in a sense today, but it's always, the world is always ending is the message, I think. And if you leave your house alone, or if you stop taking care of your plants, things just rot. They turn back into chaos, or perhaps into nature. And nature's not bad, but you know what I mean. We are the counterforce to chaos itself, and um, I
That's
can't
what
help
life
but
is.
yeah, it's true. And that's like, you see the ark. This little thing could be like a seed in a sea of chaos, but it's what preserves the world, and all of us have that responsibility. That's what I liked about the story told through Jordan's perspective, is that he puts the mirror back at you and like, you're Noah. Like, the world is ending. What are you going to do about it? And your arc may be like a whole country. It could also be one household or just yourself, but there's definitely things you can and should do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I feel
and
like
like, go ahead.
the two things to do or that you can do, it's like I feel like you can see a society trend towards maybe two different types of chaos, but like the chaos of like conflict, explicit, or like revival, essentially. Like I think you can see it go to, yeah, the chaos of conflict, or that like, or like the flow of revival, and how it's like a returning from, like, it's sort of like a, I feel like as you see, as things become more and more and more polarized, you either have that like violent clash back, or you can have that like, hey yo, we all need to like learn how to flow in the middle again, like
Yeah.
and that's that. I mean, I feel like for where we're at in a cultural moment too, that's for sure to be determined. But I have a lot of hope as well. Like I see a lot of signs of revival personally. I think that what we're doing right now to some degree is a sign of revival, a spiritual revival. And I think that that is the potential antidote. And I think it's going to happen either way, really. It's just like, you want to do this the easy way or the hard way, kind of, like
Yeah.
perhaps they're both hard ways, but one is much preferable to the other. Who knows?
Yeah, they're definitely both hard. I thought about this as well with the fourth turning, reading that book, and like, what is our crisis? Was it
Mhm.
our lockdown period?
Let's
Um,
hope. Let's hope that was enough.
yeah, I'm really hoping that it's not like World War III. And there's a degree to which you self-fulfill these prophecies. Like, I saw these things popping up on Twitter where people are all like pointing toward reasons why the world is ending, and it's like, well, if that's the way we're gonna think and speak about it, then it's probably gonna happen. You
Mhm.
need a positive vision. It's good to
Mhm.
have a negative vision to be prepared against, but if that's all you're presenting, then there's nothing to do. Like, there needs to be a solution to problems, and I think Noah symbolizes that.
There is the image of the flood, and there's the chaos, and there's that, but it's also an image of baptism, which is another kind of disillusion,
Mhm.
preparing for rebirth and renewal. And everybody talks about the apocalypse, and the problem is that everybody's kind of a heathen now. So we talk about apocalypse, and we're like, oh, like. But at the end of the story, there's the apocalypse, but like the end is like the new Jerusalem, like the new paradise. That's the part of the story that's getting left out because I don't know. Uh, I'll just say it, the way people talk about things is that they don't really believe that the good part comes afterward. They're just
No.
preparing for the collapse, and then there's nothing else. And even
Mhm.
people who kind of talk with this religious, conservative Christian, whatever, really focused on the catastrophe. Like
Yeah.
overwhelmingly, everything is ending, and I get
Why?
it, but
Why do you?
you gotta look past to the like, what is the pattern though? Like,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
does it go? Um, yeah, so that
Why
kind of
do you
bugs me.
think that subgroup seems to be? Because you would sort of think, right? Well, you would think that like the more spiritually aware would be concluding that like the good's going to win in the end, you know? Why does it seem that the religious group is so, are they just aware of what's wrong, you know? Like,
I
I
think
don't
that
know.
it's
No,
go
go ahead.
on.
Well, I don't know if how religious the explicitly religious are sometimes, if you know what I mean. Like you can say that you're a Christian, but if you don't believe that the world is good, then are you a Christian?
yeah,
There's a
right.
lot of people that are embracing Christianity because they hate wokeism, for example. Does that make you a Christian? Well, your faith
Mm.
is motivated by hatred, so I'm not sure about that. Uh, I'm not taking down all conservative Christians, but like there is a degree to which it's different to say that you're a Christian and to act like one, and to really have faith like Jesus did. That's foundational, and that's really difficult. So I'm not sure if that's people that are more spiritually in tune, or yeah. So
I mean,
that's
they still have belief systems, which everybody needs, right? We all have that, but those are still. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or you're whatever you are, whatever identity thing you have. Your belief system right now is still being stress tested to the extreme. Everybody. I mean, that's why some people, everybody's kind of doubling down, right? We see that everywhere because everything is going through the flood. Like that's
yeah,
what happens. So everything is being tested. Like it is the test. Like how strong do you believe this? What are you going to act on? If you really think the world's ending, how then are you going to act?
yeah.
Um, is a good
Mm-hmm.
one, I think.
Yeah, that is a good question.
By the way, what does apocalypse mean?
Means a reveal. No, revealing. No.
Yeah,
What
something
is
like
it?
that. I think
Yeah,
it's like revealing
unveiling maybe.
revelation, something like that. I think there's a
Yeah.
more beautiful translation, but I was just looking it up because I read something about that yesterday, and it's I think there's a truth to that when the world is ending or when it's close to like this state of apocalypse, people become aware of the patterns. Like normally we don't question religion or like fundamental assumptions about our reality. We do, like 21st century people, we have atheism, but like throughout the history of time, that's very rare. That happens cyclically, I think, but that's not normal. Like we're a very anomalous era in the sense that a lot of things are revealed to us explicitly or through explanation, um, and experience that yeah, that's not a normal thing. Like us being aware of like Peugeot symbolism and stuff like that, people didn't think about it like that. The reason that it's so salient and interesting to us is because we're the age of the questioners and the age without tradition in a sense. um, at least we're not completely decoupled from it, but we lost a lot of it, and so we're all wowed by someone like Jordan who speaks about very commonsensical things and explains stories that a lot of us were exposed to for a very long time, and he just finds a spin on it um, that makes them all of a sudden alive to us. But to a lot of cultures that, or a lot of times and places, that was just all of these things were self-evident, and like we're being pulled from this spell of materialism that was a bit of a curse that we're now awakening from. But yeah,
Yeah.
apocalypse.
Cain and
What's
Abel.
loading up? Beautiful.
Yeah. Let's see. This one is based on the Cain and Abel story. Um, it is not two people, obviously. It is based on a dream that I had
Mm.
um, about two groups of uh, wolves, and one side was red, the other was blue. This was just before um, the 2016 election in the U.S. And I had this dream about it was very like an impersonal kind of dream, and the way that kind of relates to the story of Cain and Abel, at least for me, It was such a weird time. That time, like 2015, 2016, it was so weird.
It's been weird. It's been a weird time, like, since then too. It's all been weird,
Since
yeah.
then. Right, but that's when it got like, oh, it's like everything started. So what I kind of identified at that time that made sense to me was there was this emergence of the shadow, like in
Mhm.
Jungian psychology, there's the idea of the shadow, and collectively that seems to be what was happening, and it was happening in all these different facets and all these different ways. So there was like the Pepe memes, if you guys remember, the
Yeah.
Pepe memes, which is like there's the trickster, right? So in these times of transition, the trickster comes out, and it's all ridiculous and paradoxical and absurd. Um, but
The
there's
troll.
also so like everything became extremely polarized right around then, and that was when Trump came up, Jordan Peterson came up, Pajot following shortly after, and they were like, um, I don't know. There was a lot of the trans stuff coming up, which is again like this masculine, feminine, paradoxical kind of stuff. So it all kind of came together, and the idea of the story of Cain and Abel is the hostile brothers. It's this archetypal story. It's recurring all over the place, and they're kind of in the Bible, the first one, but in a way, they're also again this unfolding of this fractal masculine feminine thing. If you get into the story, Cain is very much associated with the earth. He's the first. He's what is the other thing? He's a farmer, I believe, and Abel is a shepherd, which has this more spiritual role
I think
in
Cain
the
was, like, more of a hunter. I'm pretty
yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
I think he was a farmer, so he's
farmer.
attached to the
Okay.
earth,
Oh,
right? Like it's
I'm mixing up Esau and Jacob, actually. You're right.
yeah. But
Very
that
good.
again is the same hostile brothers motif. So the older brother being like Esau, I think means red, somebody told me, I want to say,
Mm,
or he was described as being red. So there's this recurring thing about the first being red and then the second or the younger brother being kind of this more spiritually inclined kind of thing for
mm.
whatever reason. There's probably like very complicated reasons that I don't understand going on there, but um, yeah, so it's kind of the story of Cain and Abel, but at the same time, it was also this moment that was actually happening at that when I made it. I think I ended up making it in 2018 or maybe 17, but the ideas had been gestating, like, noticing these patterns and everything come up. And yeah, the red and the blue again, I was just really getting into that and going with that theme again. So I mean, yeah, all those things came up at that time, and I feel like Cain is also like this shadow. So um it was just very like relevant at the time with all of those things going on.
I don't remember if we recorded about this, but when we spoke about the dragons before, there's so the dragons in the corners for those listening. There's like blue in them as well. Is there a specific reason for that?
Yeah, I just wanted to get a mix of red and blue for the edges because if you have these dragons on the edge, they're kind of like chaos monsters, and there's an idea about opposites, like they can um I don't know who said it or where this came from, but there's the idea about opposites coming together in love or enmity. I'm
Yeah,
not even sure if I'm saying that right, but love and hate, right? They like there's love and strife, so things can come together or they can be pulled apart in conflict. But it's either way, it's this locking together of opposites.
yeah,
Uh, so that theme is just kind of playing out in the whole thing. I guess I just wanted to repeat that everywhere because I think it's the most fundamental thing. And
yeah,
obviously, Cain and Abel are, he murders his brother, so it's a conflict, but um, it's a like the little dragons almost look like they're kissing, which I kind of like. Um, so it's just kind of a little play on that idea.
So much of your art is fundamental, right? You just said the word fundamental, and I feel like that, balance and polarities, it seems to me. Like when I first started trying to figure out like what the hell is going on in this whole world, and like the beginning of my existential crisis, and the deep dives that I did after that, trying to figure out like, okay, what does this all mean? The three Perhaps the first thing that actually really stood out to me was like balance. I felt like you couldn't understand anything if you weren't able to understand the importance of balance. And it felt to me that the idea of balance was like the most fundamental idea, and that you know, there's a reason that the yin yang symbol, I believe, is like the oldest recorded symbol that we have that has like maintained itself over time, you know? And so it's like, that's like foundational, you know? And then Genesis is like the oldest stories, if I could use such a word, that we have recorded as well, you know? And which means that it's, you know, so your work is so fundamental. This is, you know, Genesis creation is perhaps like the most fundamental of the fundamental, but then this is the first relational story between two regular human beings that exists, you know, two not, you know, human-made human beings, so to speak. And I feel like this is like it seems to me that this is like the fundamental moral conflict, in that like it's the battle of resentment and jealousy and bitterness and the growth of bitterness and what that turns into, you know? And I feel like that's something that you can understand, but it's like a spiritual battle that you have to engage in, like day to day, week to week, month to month, like on every time frame. You know, you always have to be aware of like, okay, well, I feel like learning to engage with my resentment was one of the most important things that, yeah, like a psychological and in almost like I don't know. So I feel like I learned this sort of through like a meditation practice as well, of like, I'm just noticing my emotions broadly. When you notice resentment come up, it's like, what's going on there? Is there something I need to do? Is there something I need to say? Do I feel like I'm being taken advantage of? Am I being unreasonable? You know, like, am I just expecting too much out of somebody? Like, would it be fair for them to expect the same from me if the roles were reversed? You know, that sort of thing. I feel like that, I don't know, it seems like perhaps the reason that it is the first story is that it's like, it seems to me to be one of the most fundamental psychological / spiritual / like things that you need to be aware of perpetually.
Yeah. I'd like to say something about that because I just listened to the chapter on Cain and Abel in Jordan's new book, and he describes this battle as well. He says that when Cain kills Abel, it's fratricide, meaning that he killed his brother, but it's also deicide in the sense that it's a fight against God from Cain's side. Like he almost tries to deny God in the sense that he denies the goodness of reality and he shakes his fist at him and he kills his brother in protest to it. And even more than that, that travels down to his descendants, like drastically so. And yeah, I think everyone has Cain inside of him and Abel as well.
It's the slaying of the ideal. Can you guys, frick, we're frozen. You know, the slaying of the ideal, I feel like that's a great thing, not a great thing, but a significant thing that I'm noticing in the culture as well, is that like that resentment of like sort of like hating what is good to some degree. And maybe that's like too deep of a reading into it, you know, but it seems to me like there's a lot of the destruction of the ideal. This is a crazy aside to pull in here, but I'm going to do it. There's this girl that people have been talking about on X the past couple of days who went and had sex with 100 men in a day. It was some sort of like, have you guys seen this? Have you guys seen this at all? Well, Lucas is frozen. So, but yeah, it's just, she was like, I'm going to like sleep with 100 men in a day.
Yeah.
That's ambitious. That's crazy.
Yeah. It was all organized. And then you see her after and she's like shattered, you know, and, you know, she was doing this whole thing and, you know, she was all like laissez, like it's no big deal, whatever, you know, and you see her after and she, you know, she's like a, whatever, you know, porn star of some, you know, it's what she does kind of thing. And she comes out and she's talking about it and she's like crying and she's like, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, you know? And I'm sitting there like, I feel like it's like, part of me is like, yeah, duh, you know, like, you know, maybe like almost, you know, all of me is thinking like, duh, of course, you know, but then I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, well, so what's going on here? You know, like why would somebody be driven to do something like this? And the two things that it seemed to me was like, it seemed to me to be in some ways this, it seemed to me to be in some ways like I will like slay the ideal personally, you know, like I will, if you I don't like that people have told me like how I should behave. And so if you present me with an image of the ideal, I'll like try and do the opposite to my full extent to some degree, you know? And then I also thought, well, this is maybe less relevant to this, but the psychologist to me was like, man, maybe she just really hates her dad, basically, and wants to like cause pain there to some degree, or show that like I can do what I want, nobody controls me, kind of thing, you know. Like I kind of read some of that into it, but and who knows exactly what it is for her, but you know, she came out of it and it was just like shattered, you know. It's like, yeah, you know, it's like you enter into the most like vulnerable soul bonding type of things in a day. Lost me. I'm back. I don't know if you lost me. Yeah, I don't know, that just made me think of that.
Can you hear me still? I'm frozen, but can you hear me?
Yeah, your video's frozen, but we traded.
I can't see any of you, but I will respond to it. I did see like the 40 seconds of her when she came out of it and she was crying and everything. And well, I heard she wants to do 1,000 later on, which is
so much talking, man.
That doesn't seem even healthy, like just like in a aside from all morality or any other question, like like
it's pretty crazy. But I see it as a manifestation of, or at least it's a playing out of, so you have different ideologies about, well, let's say sexuality in this regard. And what Piaget often does is he takes them to the extreme. And this is taking the idea of do whatever you want sexually, no consequences, to its extreme. And then you really start to uncover its fruits. So the fruits of an idea. And in this case, that is like rotten to the core. And it's, I think, lamentable for her. But I mean, the fact that these men also participate in this, I think it's really it's a sad thing. You don't hear me, do you?
It's sad. No, I do hear
you. Oh, I'm so afraid it was all for frozen. All of it. Okay, good.
Yeah, well, one of these days we're gonna be making money from posting online, so we can afford Starlink, and we'll have our internet beam directly to these satellites rotating around space, and we won't have to, you know, or we'll just all move to less rural places. Well, I'll move to a less rural place soon. I don't. You guys don't need to. I feel ready to move on, but any other thoughts on this?
Well, maybe I can try to back out of my thing to get my video back.
Yeah, let's do it real quick.
So I'll need like a minute. I think I'll have to restart quickly though. Yeah, but
cool. This would be a great time for, I wanted to try something. I'm thinking of, okay, so I texted you this. I don't even know if I fully got there, but I texted you this, you know, this writing that was about this. And then when I sent it, when I just looked at the writing in my notes, I have like a lot of, it was a period of time where I was doing this a lot. Perhaps I'll actually include this in the actual recording too. But there's a period of time where in my notes, I was like, I would attach the song that I'd written that piece to just the writing in my notes, you know. And sometimes that was like, I'd be listening through a playlist and one song would jump out as like, that fits this, you know, that's the song for it. And sometimes I would, like a psychopath, I would sit there and listen to a song on repeat for like an hour as I like wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote the same thing, you know. And so I remember this, I was dealing with a bunch of stuff in my head at the time, you know, which makes it no different from any other time in my life for the most part. I was going to the same cafe every day, just like writing, listening to music, writing, listening to music, writing. This one was like in that same era. So I can picture myself like in this like, I don't know, I see it. Like when I was listening to it and reading it back last night when I was like trying to prepare for this discussion a little bit for half a second, I like saw myself like where I was in that same spot that I sat in this cafe in Bali. Maybe I'll like put up a picture if I have it, but there's like the same spot and there's like these beautiful like palm trees outside. And I'm like listening to this sad music with my little cappuccino or whatever it is, you know, like writing the same thing over and over. So I wanted to see you back, Lucas. I see your little black box, but I don't see you.
Can
Oh,
you hear me?
oh, I can hear Robot Lucas asking if we can hear him. Let's start here. What does this mean? I'm excited for this. Just to like flex on everybody, by the way, I bought the original of this. No one else can get it. All right, that's all.
Okay. So
which if you want to tell prints of it, I wouldn't be offended, by the way.
No, I never could get a good image of it. So you have the original. That's it. That's all there is. So.
All right, I'm going to sell prints of it then.
Wow.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Should I kind of explain the context a little bit?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. Wasn't sure where we were going. Okay. So I made this after I had a dream. It's in my Instagram. If you go and click on it, I kind of explained it a little bit. Maybe I didn't. I had this dream, and it doesn't matter most of the dream, but the weirdest thing in the dream was that I saw a rabbit that was caught by an eagle, and it was not an eagle, an owl. It was caught by this owl, and it was flying, and then a much bigger owl, a white one, came and swooped and got the other owl. So it was like this very weird, like, predator gets the prey, but then there's another predator. There's something above that, and it was this huge white eagle. So it was this very like striking image. And there was just in the dream, I won't go through the dream or whatever, it doesn't matter, but there was kind of this circular imagery, this kind of like making a circle. And so I put it in this format just because I really have I still don't know what that means. But it was just such a shocking thing. But at the end of the dream, I was sitting there with Jordan Peterson, and he asked me, what does it mean to be ruled? And it was a really unsettling question. And I started writing about it, later the next day or whatever. And then over the next couple days, and I was talking about it with somebody, and I kind of subtly switched what he had said to what does it mean to serve. And when I realized that, when I looked and saw what I'd written down before, I was kind of surprised. I'm like, oh, I changed the whole context of this dream just with this rephrasing of these words. And it kind of weirded me out because I was like, okay, how many things am I doing that with? It's because serving something is much more appealing than being ruled by something. That's kind of downgrading. I don't know. It's being subjugated somehow, being much smaller, like probably feeling more like the rabbit than like, I don't know, the medium owl or something like that. But then so I changed it around, and I didn't even realize that I did that. So there was just kind of pondering on that, and this sort of moving from things coming up, let's say from a dream or from the unconscious, and then the way that we tamper with them consciously to suit our own image or expectations. It really kind of freaked me out. So that's what this was about, was just kind of a meditation on that idea. And then, I remember you sending me something that you had written after maybe looking at that, or it was like had to do something with that, but it was kind of a while ago now. Can't remember.
Yeah, I feel like I should read that there because I feel like it's a continuation of the story a bit, and then we'll discuss it right after. So let me just boop, boop. We'll see if this works, man. It just totally might not work, and if not, whatever. But that's what we're on the edge out here. This show is all on the edge the whole time on the edge of technology and our abilities. Okay, did you guys hear?
No, it cut out. Sorry.
All right, it is what it is.
Like,
it is what it is.
Or you could just read the text to us and overlay the music later.
All right, we're gonna make do with what we got. My grandma always used to say to me, Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. You know, it was kind of just like nut up or shut up. You know.
Nice. Yeah.
So you know, we will nut up. What does it mean to serve? What does it mean to be ruled? Who or what are you a slave to? Have you chosen willfully, or has something taken you captive? Everybody acts out a story, but very few know what their story is. And everyone serves a master, but very few know who their master is. You should know what your story is, because it might be a tragedy, and maybe you don't want it to be. And you should know who your master is, because it could be something dark, and maybe you don't want it to be. A friend once asked me, Jake, are you religious? I answered, I think everyone's religious. They didn't understand, and I don't blame them. I tried to explain, everybody has deeply held values, conscious or unconscious. Everyone follows something immaterial. Anyone who has ever felt remorse is aware of a more proper way of being. But what is the proper way of being? This is the fundamental religious question. Everyone must ponder it at some point in their life. Haven't you? I believe in hell. I've seen it written on the pages of history, heard its echoes in the voices of the tormented, and have felt it personally. I'm no stranger to the dark. And there, in that place of great suffering, dangling over the edge of the abyss by the tips of my fingernails, I saw so clearly. Suddenly I knew that love and truth were firm foundations I could hold on to until the storm had passed, and then after it had passed. I learned what will withstand even the darkest hell, and that if you invite the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of what is highest, the Spirit of love, truth, hope, peace, and integrity, and all that is good to dwell within you, and decide to make yourself a slave to it, you will be delivered from any hell, be it in this life or another. Beautiful, blissful state. It's not ancient spiritual wish-wash. It's true. And if you allow yourself to be a slave to deceit, hatred, selfishness, and despair, you will have no doubt of this. How much did we hear?
All of it. That was great.
Amazing.
We got it. Oh, yes,
got it.
Jake. Beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
That was really good.
You know, I was reviewing this yesterday, I mentioned, and I hadn't looked at it for like about a year. And it was funny to me that it hadn't occurred to me that when we spoke, Lucas, I told you this story about when I wrote about in this, and I wrote this soon after that had occurred. And I didn't really realize that occurrence had stuck with me so much, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think that was like a realization for me when the friend asked, like, are you religious? And I was like, yes, but like when I say yes, like what you're going to hear when I say yes to that isn't exactly what I mean, you know? So I couldn't just simply answer with like, yes, you know, it's kind of the classic, you know, do you believe in God? It's like what you hear when I say yes isn't right. So now we have to like have a deeper conversation. You just want a yes or no, and like, oh, everyone's gonna get all upset that I'm not being straightforward, blah, 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 you know?
Yeah.
But and then yeah, so is there anything that stood out to you guys from it? I might have a couple specific questions, but
I think that it kind of underpins everything we've already been talking about. And I feel like we've been talking about it, some of the like maybe a little bit darker stuff, or yeah, like the little bit dark, maybe a little bit darker, like the negative side maybe of things a little bit. And I tend to look at those patterns probably more than other things, and I like just the way you pull it all together and settle it on love and truth as a foundation is like the perfect way to tie up all of those things.
tie up. Sorry, I lost you.
It's just it's the best way to tie up everything.
All of the things.
I think we're all cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, it's so fun. We're doing great, guys. Everybody's doing great. I appreciate everybody's effort. Um, yeah, because that was the thing for me, in that I feel like I'd been like, I'd almost intentionally traumatized myself by the darkness. Sort of, we mentioned, I mentioned this to you guys the first time. I was like, I felt like I saw, you said Lucas, that like the creatives see like what is coming, the artists see what other people can't, like while it still feels like it's not there, sort of thing. And I felt like we were in this cultural moment where I was like, oh, I'm quite alarmed about where I see things headed, and I feel like I can feel, perhaps in that more intuitive feminine sense, I feel like I can feel where we're headed, and it doesn't look good. And then I felt like I had this responsibility to understand the darkness to help avoid it. I felt like it was really like responsibility oriented. I feel like I felt like I had to like look at the dark things that were happening in the world. Oh, I didn't realize we didn't have this up. I've been looking at it this whole time. I felt like I had to like look at the dark things in the world, and so that had happened. I was feeling that feeling before COVID happened, basically. And that was when I was reading the Gulag Archipelago, and then COVID happened, and then I was like, like, all right, everybody wake up, like it felt like if this was going to turn, this would be the time that it would turn, fourth turn, so to speak. And so then I was so this was beginning of this year, is that right? Yeah, it was the beginning of this year when I wrote this, and we talked about my mushroom trip. That was heaven and hell, essentially, the two polarities in that way. And then so when I wrote I believe in hell, I've seen it written on the pages of history, heard its echoes in the voices of the tormented, which like, if that's when someone's traumatized, when someone's gone through something really dark, and they're out of it, but you can hear in their voice when they've been there, and you can kind of recognize that. And I think it's part of why, like, people, like, I feel like really difficult experiences make people more empathetic, because it's like, oh, that's right, it can get dark, like. And so when you see people at the bottom of a pit, it I feel like it increases your empathy in that way. And so so it goes on to say, the last thing. And there, in that place of great suffering, dangling over the edge of the abyss by the tips of fingernails, I saw so clearly. Suddenly I knew that love and truth were firm foundations that I could hold on to until the storm had passed. And then it ends with, it's not just ancient spiritual wish-wash, it's true. If you allow yourself to be a slave to deceit, hatred, selfishness, and despair, you will have no doubt of this. And so, to tie it back to the starting, to this piece, really, what does it mean to serve? What does it mean to be ruled? I don't know, that just that this why I bought this piece too was that I feel like that I like saw this and I thought about it for like days. I was like, what does it mean to serve? What, and perhaps more longer than days, but what does it mean to serve? What does it mean to be ruled? And then, like, who rules you? Who you everybody is a slave to something. What have you chosen to make yourself a slave to? Or have you even chosen, like, or has something just taken you captive when you weren't paying attention?
That's really beautiful. I really don't have much to add to it. I just think it's very insightful and existential. Like, I think a lot of people need to hear this. Might be a tragedy, like Jung says. Yeah.
And maybe you don't want it to be. And you might be, because if you ask, like, what is my highest, what rules me, what do I pursue, what have I put in the highest place, it's like, you might not like the answer, but like, don't not look at it. That's not worse. It's not going to go away, if you just don't look at it and don't like the answer, and I feel like you have to continue doing that all the time. I feel like you always have to be asking yourself, like, what am I serving right now? Because I'm wrestling with that all the time. And you have to have, so something has to sit at the top of the hierarchy. Something has to sit on the throne, right? Or yeah, but there's things you need to do, you know, like there's like I think of this in terms of money often, because you need money to do things. Money is energy, and you should be directing energy in the most positive ways that you can. But you know, that's something that I wrestle with, of like, am I making this? Am I abdicating a greater calling by focusing on money, or am I focusing on this money in a way that gives aid to the greater calling? You know, that supports that. So that's something I wrestle with this a lot.
Yeah, maybe then the third question to tack on to the end of these two is something like, what would you be willing to give up, I suppose. Then you kind of know which thing might be on top, or maybe you don't want it to be. But like could you give up money, or could you give up maybe what you feel like that higher calling is? Like,
It's a
to like
confrontational one, the money one.
yeah.
Yeah. You say
No, like
confrontational.
when you really think about it, yeah, it's super confrontational in the sense that I'd uh, I had Elizabeth Oldfield on the channel, and she speaks about this of like, you know, in the Bible, it speaks a lot about not, you know, just keeping your wealth and like hoarding it in a sense, and like who of us are really like coming to grips with the idea that, um, you know, we should give as much as we can. Like I'm not living up to that ideal for sure. Like I have a vision of having more than I need, and I'm like easily used to that idea and luxury, just little things even. Um, that's that's super difficult to discard with, but there's
The
a reality
solution.
to money ruling a lot of us. Go ahead.
The solution that helps me when I'm dealing with this solution idiom thing I try to remember is to like is the Peterson because well, I guess I should start with the problem first that's related to this, which is that I feel like where I most often deal with the problem is not actually feeling like I don't have enough. I'm a pretty simple man, you know. I don't, there's not a lot that like I feel like I really need. I feel like also part of what I grew up like I grew up, you know, there were 7 of us in my home. We lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. My parents, you know, like we were I'm hesitant to say like poor. We were like relative poor to where I lived, you know, like we also lived in the United States, and like, you know, we're probably in the maybe the 1% of like global wealth, you know. So like I feel like you're not allowed. I feel like if you like live in a developed country, you're like not allowed to call yourself poor almost. But it's all relative. But and I dropped, and I'm gonna assume that I'm back and keep going.
Weird.
Cool. So I feel like I'm what I'm getting at is that I feel like I'm like I don't need a lot to be content. It's never really been that way for me. But the issue that I run into is more of a comparison sort of issue, or more of, you know, maybe like a precursor to the Cain and Abel sort of problem. Like I don't exactly get to like resentment with the money stuff, but more like I feel like I can't shake this feeling sometimes of like, oh, I don't want to get behind. But then it's like, behind what? You know, like behind
Yeah,
who? Behind compared to what? You know, like, but yeah,
yeah,
like because you're only getting behind if there's some marker that you're comparing yourself to that is, you know, and it's and you know, you need to pay your rent, you need to be able to buy food, you know, you need to be able to afford internet, you know, as we're learning, you know, but but I feel like the solution that comes up for me when I'm wrestling with that is of like orient myself towards what's highest, and then compare myself to who I was yesterday, you know? So it's like, I'm not trying to keep up with anybody. I'm trying to like progress in a way that moves me towards my ultimate goal, and my money serves that, you know? And I feel peace when I feel like I'm making decisions that are in alignment with that. And then when I feel like I'm tormented, when I feel like I'm like hoarding wealth to like try and keep up with some very silly game that like mostly has never interested me in my whole life, you know? But well,
yeah.
I guess when I'm like consciously aware, it seems. Um,
I mean,
but that's something I wrestle with.
Jake,
Yeah.
for the two of us, like Bitcoin is a god as well, you know, and I see a lot of people serving it
It's
completely
so
and like
religious. It's
worshiping it.
so interesting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it is. I went to a conference in Amsterdam, Bitcoin Amsterdam, 2023, I think, and I mean, for a lot of people, that's what's at the top. And like, I had this tendency myself when I was just starting university, and I was like focusing on putting more into that. Um, like it impeding me from going to social events. Like I just wanted to stack as much as possible. And I was like, whoa, there's definitely
I
something
lost
wrong. And
it,
I,
but I have to force you to go back because I was too interested in hearing what you were saying.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you're
no,
saying,
that I like, I was hoarding Bitcoin instead of going to like social events with people that I like really liked and loved. And
uh-huh, you're like
um,
not living your life. You're just like, I gotta stack, I gotta get
yeah,
to a
and
whole coin, whatever it is.
I hadn't even thought about it as a bad thing before, but then I was like, wow, I'm really worshiping this thing. And so I
Mhm.
really stopped doing that. Um, but, it can catch you and you can be unaware of it. And I think your writing illustrates that perfectly.
That was the first week that I started working on the What Is Money show. Me and I was talking with Robert. We were like having this first, just kind of like we're getting to know each other. Had some of that we were pretty busy first couple of weeks, and in that we had a dinner, I think, with one of the guests. I think it was after the dinner we were talking, and I was saying like I felt like that was like my, so that's all been a roller coaster. But
Yeah.
do I even want to talk about? Can I talk about this? I feel like there's actually. Hmm. There's parts of this that I don't want to talk about publicly, but there's a message here I'm trying to get to underneath. Let me start. So yeah, that first week we had a conversation and I said that like I felt like part of my calling in the space was to remind people that like this is just money and the things that have been true about money for all of time. And it's a really good money. I think that there's good in that it serves the good. I think that it's a tool to bring us towards the good. But but there's been a like there's been a totalization of what you or what you said of like there's been a placing this in the position of God that like is it's quite alarming to me. And in fact, dare I say it, in fact, it's crossed my mind a number of times. I was like, this is either like one of the best things that's ever happened to humanity or it's the Antichrist, like it's
Yeah.
like, because it's like I think that this might usher in an era of like freedom and prosperity and
Yeah.
most importantly into a game, like it put the world into a game where like people have to be where interactions need to be more consensual, where you're able to get away with less force, with less coercion, with less forcing people to do things because like because like less of a might makes right type of society. Although Jason Lowry would debate me on this, but
Yeah.
but but or I think it's such a good thing, and I do still think it's a really good thing. And I'm not to the Antichrist point yet, but I also worry about AI being the Antichrist. But I think that I don't know. Yes, that was when I originally started. It was like that was a big concern, especially as I started getting more and more involved in the space. I started meeting more people in like the quote unquote higher ranks of like the Bitcoin ecosystem. Like some people really know this and some people do not know it. Some people really know this is a tool to serve the good and it's not the good. And it's very clear. They're very clear about this. And some people don't seem to be aware of that, and it seems particularly the like a religious people, Nietzsche said the death of God would bring about this era where the like political, where people become like religiously political, to like summarize essentially. And it
Yeah.
seems to me that those who don't have we have a religious instinct as humans, and those who don't have something filling that place, they'll squeeze in something else there, and so I've seen a lot of that, and I think it's very worth keeping your eyes peeled. But it's tough too, because there's this arc analogy with Bitcoin as well, right? Where like there's, you know, the global economic system is sinking. This is how I explain it to people often, is like, you're on the Titanic, your ship is sinking, and like your money is going down in value, and the longer you stay on the sinking ship, the more painful it's going to be, and maybe you won't even get off of the sinking ship, you know. Well, if you don't get off of it. And so I think that there is that, I do explain it in like sort of like catastrophic terms, because it is quite serious, you know, what's going on there. But yeah, everything in its proper place.
Yeah. Wait, Jake's still there? You hear us?
Yeah.
I do have to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but
Perfect.
I will say to like connect this with Genesis and stuff we've been talking to, reminds me of Peterson. In his first episode on Genesis, he says something along the lines of, I might be Christianity's like best defender or something, or like its worst critic. And I was like, ooh, there's something there as well. Like the ark reliance for responsible citizenship, stuff like that, could be like the savior, and it's called ark as well. So it made me think of that. But you know, there's also snakes inside of Peterson, and spirit of Cain looms there as well. So it's just something to be aware of as well. Like you should always question whatever you're worshiping or spending a lot of energy on, which in my case, a lot of it is like Peterson's work in these circles. So I'd done away with Bitcoin as a god, but there's something very ugly about some aspects to like Jungians or Petersonians. Jung didn't want Jungians, and Peterson, I don't think, wants Petersonians. So there's an importance to realize what is beyond those names.
When like the anti-ideology thing becomes like an ideology, and it's like, wait a second.
Yes, like Batman, Dark Knight. Do you know the quote?
No.
Jake will know the quote.
Which what?
You either live long enough to see you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. That's what it is.
That's very relevant.
Yeah, I don't know if Jake got it.
We froze, but I knew there's one place where we don't have to go back. You die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. We're frozen again, huh?
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, you got it.
Just devastating. Yeah, we have seen that, you know, and I feel like there's to some degree, you know, everybody loves being in the mob, you know, everybody loves, especially those tilted towards the Luciferian intellect. I don't know if that's too much of a stretch, but especially those who love, you know, there's utility to criticism, right? And you know, there's a degree to which intelligence helps you be a better critic, but you also see too, you know, you see this with Peterson, where, you know, sometimes I'm like, man, you're kind of off, man, you're missing it, man, you know, you gotta, you know, you're off here. But also too, I feel like there you see another side, and it's more probably the side of the audience who got introduced to Peterson from the rational atheism. You know, you listen to Dawkins talking with Peterson, and there's this undertone of like, ugh, these stupid people beneath me, you know. And so people love to criticize those who have like risen as well, who have risen to a high place. And, you know, maybe to some degree it's an attack of the ideal, but also, you know, there's just criticism of where Peterson has gone with some stuff. But then also too, I feel like his community, his following, whatever you call it, is sometimes I feel like people are real quick to be like, oh, he's gotten some wrong. Because and why I feel that too is like, I feel like I felt that in myself. And I feel like I even felt that. I remember like leaving a comment on one of his videos like 2 or 3 years ago and being like, you know, like hypercritical of something that he was saying, you know, and like thinking that I was like offering something helpful. And I think there was something helpful to offer perhaps, but I felt this energy underneath it. And I think that there's something underlying that needs to be watched out for too, as we like justly criticize, or at least justly judge, you know, justly delineate what is wheat and chaff, you know.
Yeah.
The
So
folder, I have a folder on my laptop. It's like my creative projects for whatever video I'm working on, and it's called "Create, Don't Criticize," because I noticed that in myself, when I criticize, everything just gets worse. Like, for me, it's
Mm.
just devastatingly bad. So any video I make, I want to make sure it's not a criticism of anything. I want it to be constructive, creative.
You guys, thank you very, very much for bearing with me through this. I think this is about another 2-hour chat, you know. So those we breeze
so.
through 2-hour chats pretty quick, and then my brain is like 2-hour chats is about what my brain can handle. I tell you what, you know, right at the end, it's like there it is. Especially because it's later for y'all over there too. But thanks so much. I feel like I feel like we're doing something helpful, and that is like that's I think what we all want to be doing. And so, you know, we're gonna keep struggling through it, but and hopefully, you know, I think that iterations will help us circumambulate to the show that we all are striving towards. I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm saying. My brain's wiped. Appreciate you guys. I'm gonna end this recording. Maybe we can do a short little debrief.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye, audience. Love you guys. Adios.